So we have my dear friend who I actually vacation with. So if you vacation with somebody, you're really good friends.
That is a good friend. Yes.
That is 100%, a good friend, right? They see in your PJs and stuff. When you have a PJ friend, that's a different friend.
Yes.
This is my friend, Jennifer Weitz, and she is actually an attorney, but she is really an educational advocate is what she is. She's a trained attorney, and she represents children with special education needs under the law IDEA, as well as children who require accommodations. And I'm so grateful that you're here, because this is sort of almost like an emergency meeting of sorts, because I'm not going to swear, but it's a bad situation right now with the federal law. They do not know what to do with students under this quarantine, and they're gonna make a really bad decision, a federal decision, or they're thinking about, basically for the next year, saying like we're kind of off the hook. I'm exaggerating, but we have you here to provide facts, to tell us what we know, what parents can do with special needs kids. In all the, I'm a special needs mom. Jen's a special needs mom. This is some serious stuff, and we really need to know what our rights are and what we can do with our kids. So thank you so much for joining us for this conversation.
Thank you for having me.
I don't even know where to start, Jen.
Yes, thank you so much for being here, Jen, for this really important conversation. And thank you, Dr. Roseann, for knowing how much this conversation was needed and how urgent the conversation was. Dr. Roseann said to me, we cannot wait to have this conversation. Parents our mamas need us to talk about this ASAP. And I have to admit that I would not have been aware of that. So thank you so much.
Well, as I like to tell everybody, is that my mission, and I'm also the founder and director of the Global Institute of Children's Mental Health, is that 1 in 2 children in the United States has a physical or mental health problem. This is no joke. Yes. So the amount of special ed kids vary, but there are a lot, and that's everything. That's ADD and autism and medical problems. You name it. I'm not leaving you out. It's just so broad. And these kids, so many kids with special education, what they have is an individualized education plan that they require specialized education. So, where should we start, Jennifer?
And so just to give you some background, we earlier this week did a session on unexpected, unplanned homeschooling. And so we got some really good information from Dr. Catherine and Dr. Roseann on homeschooling when you never meant to be a homeschooling mom or a homeschooling family. Maybe a good place to start would be, how does the conversation of homeschooling change when you specifically are talking about a child who has special needs based on a mental health disability or a physical health disability? Right.
So I think it's a good, very, very good question, and a good place to start for sure. There is a difference, obviously, between homeschooling. Homeschooling is something that parents opt to do, right? In order to provide certain type of education to their children, and what we're facing right now. What we're looking at right now is really unprecedented times. And it isn't that we have chosen now to homeschool our children, but we have now become their teachers, right? For all intents and purposes. And it varies across the nation depending on what your school is doing. So there are a million different ways to approach it, and every state is kind of taking their own time to figure out what to do. But right now, the federal government has given us a few guidelines, very few guidelines.
So let's go over those guidelines in terms of special education. Because I'm even hearing, Jen, that even in our region locally, and Jen works in all of Connecticut and New York, that it is really being done very differently. I know in Connecticut, each of the state commissioners, so every state has a state educational commissioner, and they're putting out different information. They're waiting for the federal government to decide. So what are they recommending at this time during this pandemic?
Right. So it's very general, unfortunately, and the states are really being left to determine what they want to do,
Oh,
and
that's great.
how they want to how they want to protect the health and safety, right, of
Yeah.
students.
They're
Um,
very lucky I don't attend school meetings anymore because everybody knows me, all my attorney friends, like
I
I
know.
can
screaming
imagine.
match anyway.
Unfortunately, at this time, they don't have to have.
I know they don't even have to have them at this point.
Right.
So that's right. Okay, so that's one of the things. Like
That
everything
was,
is sort of like off right now. Parents don't know what to get for support. So I'm sorry. So go ahead about your
right.
guidelines, Jen.
Right. So on March 12th, the Federal Department of Education issued some questions and answers, basically a fact sheet. And it basically, very simply says if school is closed and the school is not providing education to their general education students, they're under no obligation to provide education to their special needs community. It's fine, that's cut and dry, easy to understand. A lot of our Connecticut school districts are in that position right now where they're not providing any education to anyone. It then goes on to say if the school does decide to provide education, if the school is closed, but they provide distance learning or remote learning to their general ed students, then they do have to provide an education to students with disabilities. And this is where things get sticky because students with disabilities are not just cookie cutter mold people. How many different types of disabilities are there, and how do we level that playing field for them? What types of accommodations and modifications are needed to provide them with an education when they can't be at school? How profound is their disability? It goes on and on. Related services, none of this is addressed. So the schools really are left to try to figure it out on their own. Then it goes on to talk about compensatory education.
Well, let's go back to how the schools are figuring out on this own, because we're getting some comments from our tribe about, this kind of stinks, right? Yeah. So it does, right? And they're already trying to figure it out on their own before the pandemic. Let's not get, let's not even go into those murky waters. I always say that
is
going to a special ed meeting, I'd rather get a root canal than go to a special ed meeting. It's bad. It's that bad, right?
I believe that.
Right? Give me a shout out if you agree on that. So the thing is that every school district is trying something, but there's no guidance from the federal government. I'm hearing some districts putting some special ed teachers in place, offering. I think the problem is, as you kind of started out with, is that we have no consistency in education right now. Some people are doing Google Hangouts, sometimes it's Zoom, sometimes it's other things. And so I found that the majority of public schools are not doing video online live. That's what I'm hearing more and more, because they don't, there's a lot of legal parameters around that if you're looking at a child at home, then you're looking at them at home, and teachers have obligations, right? If a child's not well cared for or whatnot, just different kinds of components, and also dealing with distractions for that child. The teacher's trying to teach, and then there's distractions.
The other
that's what's happening, right?
That's absolutely what's happening. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the other piece of that is that there are students with such profound disabilities that they can't access online. And if you're going to be providing the same level of education to all of your students, you need to make it accessible to everyone. So that's part of why they're not able to provide that distance learning.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Doctor. You go ahead, Dr. Roseann.
No, you go ahead, Cleopatra, because I can talk about this all day long.
Okay, I just wanted to say that I'm struck by how this situation is another example of gaps in our society getting wider and wider, because it's one thing to have special needs in a home with plenty of resources where someone can dedicate all of their time and attention to making sure that whatever the school can't do is compensated for. But in places in homes where that's not possible because everybody's working, There's not a computer. There are so many things. This is a huge issue, because what's happening right now is that kids are going to be out of school for many weeks, if not many months, and maybe the rest of the school year. And that's a huge chunk of time that they're getting behind on their education that they'll never get to make up for. Oh, and over the long term, this is important, not just short term. And so I'm really concerned about this.
Yeah, it's a big concern. One of the things that most districts, at least in our area, are doing is providing Chromebooks to any student that does not have one.
Oh, that's awesome.
And that's part of trying to make this accessible to everyone. Providing,
because it's not even just accessibility. So some areas are giving people free Wi-Fi to students, right? But some kids don't have a device.
Right. So that's why the schools have to step in and disseminate all of those Chromebooks they have on premises, and they are doing that. I have to give them credit there. You know, they don't.
It's not possible in the larger districts.
No.
We're in a little tiny little cutie town in Connecticut, but these cities, nobody's prepared for this. I mean, we have to. I have so many teachers that come to see me, and even though our center is closed, I'm still in contact with a lot of my peeps and my mamas. And, they were thinking about this in the last few weeks, but nobody really knew what to do in advance, right?
Right.
And so, that's a whole other thing. Kids don't actually have their resources, their books and whatnot. So in terms of special ed kids, as you noted, they may be so impaired that they can't even access an online curriculum. And we have no guidance, right? We have no alternatives currently.
No guidance. People are flying by the seat of their pants right now. The teachers are trying to do their best. They're contacting families.
They're doing amazing.
The CBAs, they're reaching out in many, many districts. But, for a student that requires hands-on teaching, that requires a one-on-one paraprofessional at school, it's impossible to put that hyperactive child in front of a computer and expect them to learn. So what are we left with? We're left with parents becoming the teachers. And if you're fortunate enough to be able to be home with your child and not have to work yourself during that time, maybe you can get some things done, but we're not trained as teachers. I'm a lawyer. I never expected to sit home and teach my children, supplementary, of course, but not their
all day instruction, right?
Yes.
Jen,
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting. We don't have special needs children, but we have 3 small children, and we are in schools where they are doing video and they're having class chunks twice a day, each of the children who are already in school. And my husband noted to me, we were watching our 6-year-old and our 4-year-old sitting at the table, each of them on their own laptop, because they have the luxury of being on their own laptop. And my husband said to me, I don't know how their teachers get them to sit still and pay attention like that for that long. If it were me trying to do that with them, this would never happen. I said, well, you're not that cue for them. Their teachers and their classmates are that cue for them, so they get it, right? And so I think that not only did we never expect to not be their teachers, their response to us as their parents is very different than their response to their teachers. And that's without the additional layer of having special needs on top of it. So I can imagine that dynamic becomes even more complex when you have special needs.
That's absolutely true. And, I always say, at least with my own son, and I always tell my clients, and they agree, when you first meet that child, my son including, you set your expectations at a maximum. And so he knows how to respond to you. And my expectations were set a long, long time ago for him. And the expectation was not that I sit and read, have him read a book and ask him questions about it. The expectation was that we do life skills together, or we have fun together. And, that's what we've been doing. We've been playing games. We've been playing Go Fish and Uno and learning to sit at family dinner time, because this is a great opportunity to start learning some of these skills that we haven't been able to work on because we're not sitting around the dinner table at 6 o'clock every night. We work, my daughter gets home from school at 5 o'clock. She has homework, and my son wants to eat at 4 o'clock. So there's no family dinner. But now that things have slowed down, we sit down and we're teaching him to sit 10 minutes at a time at the table. Well, it's not learning math, it's not learning how to read, but it's something, and it's a skill that we are now finding we can teach him. We're in a different position than we had been in before. So
yeah, we've been talking, Jen, all week about sort of like making lemonade at 11. Like
yeah.
what can you take away from it? So like, that's a great thing for
beautiful. Yes.
Or like, wait a second, regardless of what your kid's age is, like, what are they going to learn? Like, my housekeeper may not be coming this upcoming week. So, they're going to be doing the dishes because I'm not. So, like learning other things. And I'm a former homeschooling mom. So, I already have a different viewpoint. You are right. This is not homeschooling. This is temporary education for our kids. And they can't be expected to sit all day and whatnot. So, you were talking about one of the other guidelines that compensatory damages.
Yes.
Am I right?
Education.
Compensatory education. Sorry, I'm always thinking legally.
I know.
Yes, I was gonna say, I think that's legal speak.
Oh my God, for my mamas who've been in a PPT with me, you know what I'm talking about. Special ed meeting, IEP. Connecticut, we call it a PPT just to mess with everybody. Us and one other state in the country call it that, right, Jen? So, some of those things, what's the next recommendation that they made for us, or guideline, I should say?
Basically, once school resumes, the IEP team, which we would call it a PPT, but the IEP team would be required to make an individualized determination about whether compensatory services are needed. And this is scary. This is scary because every special education student, after missing, whether it's 2 weeks, a month, 3 months, we don't know what it's going to be.
Well, let's talk about this. Let's talk about what the research tells us, how quickly kids, regardless if they're special ed or not, lose skills. 2 weeks.
Right.
2 weeks. Mm-hmm. So I'm not telling you to make your kids do 9 hours of work a day just to keep them up. But guess what? We're not going to just be out for 2 weeks, and we're going to be lucky if it's 4. I mean, let's be honest. Every state is sort of doing a rolling close down just to prevent us from going in shock, I think is really what it is. They're only doing hard shutdowns in New York, in California. Now Connecticut just did it. Not even a hard shutdown in Connecticut. It's, work from home if you can. And so kids lose skills fast. And so this is even more the case neurologically. Kids with special ed, whether they have an attentional issue or behavioral issue or a learning issue processing, they need more repetition to learn. And so without that, those skills can, not only can you're not going to gain skills in the same way, you can actually lose skills without that level of repetition. So that's concerning, right?
That's right. It's the regression, recoupment, how long is it going to take to regain those skills? All of these things have to be taken into consideration. And so, and again, it's the IEP team making that decision. So we're back to the drawing board. We meet with the same teachers and really, how do they know when we come back?
Well, that would be my question, right? Because when we're in special ed meetings, a lot of decisions are made on data collection.
Right.
And so we don't have solid data collection. I mean, maybe we're lucky enough if somebody had something more recent. But data points, right? Data talks in special ed meetings, right?
Absolutely.
So I think that's an important point. And, anything that parents are collecting in terms of their data, we don't know how that's going to transfer into an IEP meeting post-quarantine, right? I think they're just not going to be sure, and there's no formality. And the beauty of special education is the law. The law guides us. Right. So talk to us a little bit about, Jen, this potential change in the law that is going on right now, because I think this is the thing that is on every parent, special needs parent right now.
Right. So that's a big issue. Before I jump to that, I really quickly just wanted to say one quick thing that I always tell parents at PPT meetings and when we're reviewing proposed goals and objectives is to make sure that data collection is the way that the goal and the objective are measured. So performance criteria, percent of growth, all of that, it should be based on percent of trials, of change in percentage growth. So baseline upwards or downwards, whatever we're trying to measure.
Do you want to give an example of that? Because I think this is one of the most valuable things that parents don't get. That data is truly their language and what's going to help their kid get what they need. It's not just the evaluation, even though I'm an evaluator, I love that data. It's the data that's collected, performance data, right? Whether it's standardized or not. On that IEP, there, you know, that page, right, is a federal document. Your IEP should look the same in every place you're at. Is that you're collecting data and measuring. So give an example.
So I'll give an increase of baseline example. So you want a goal for a student with ADHD to attend. So Joey will maintain attention for 3 minutes above baseline, okay? So you want the baseline from September, say the baseline was 1 minute. Okay, now you know that you want him to attend for 4 minutes. And the way you're going to track and measure that is through data collection. So if that were the case and you had that goal, and now we come back to the table and Joey was attending for 3 minutes before all of this, because data is supposed to be taken consistently, then he goes back and now he's only attending for 2 minutes. We know that he regressed and he needs compensatory services. You really need these hard and fast numbers in this data to help you with any decision, whether you're looking for an outplacement, whether you're looking for new services, increased services, whatever it is. When you have numbers, and you're right, nothing speaks like the numbers, right?
They don't. And that's why, you know, you're such a, I'm gonna say a badass advocate.
I think we're allowed to say that.
Yeah, we can say whatever we want. I totally got a potty mouth. I try my best not to. But this deserves it right now.
Totally, I agree.
It's data, right? And really helping parents to understand. I think one of the things this is going to be a shock to a lot of parents, this whole process. Right. You know, but people think just because your kid has an IEP that it's a good IEP. And that means your kid's getting the right services, and it's often not the case. So I love an advocate. You know, I think advocates should be required, and if any parent can afford one. There's also private. There's also not private. So Jen's a private advocate, but there's also agencies that offer free services all over the United States. You could often contact your state learning disability association to find one, and that's what I would really, really recommend for people, because they are your child's advocate, and these are laws, and in order to get your child the best IEP you can, you have to understand the laws, and really it's understanding those rules. So contact your state learning disability association to get an advocate to be part of your child's team. I think it's really important, you know. So let's talk about the federal possibility of things being removed.
Right. So there was a bill proposed in Congress. Before I get into what it was walked back. So it was pulled back, and it
was already pulled back.
It was pulled back. Yes.
Okay.
The fear is, it was suggested, it was proposed, it's out there. Okay. So now the fear is, can this and will this happen? This proposal would have given the Secretary of Education authority to approve state waiver requests for any statutory or regulatory requirement of the IDEA for 1 year. That really means that the schools would have been able to not comply with regulations that have been in existence for years and years and years that protect our children under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And the fact that the very basis for them receiving a free and appropriate public education is at risk right now is terrifying.
Terrifying.
It is
Nothing
terrifying.
else to stand on. I mean, that is our basis for our children receiving the services that they are receiving. So a tremendous amount of pushback was, of course, raised when this bill was proposed, and especially by COPA, which is the Council of Professional Advocates and Attorneys, and here in Connecticut, SEEK, which is another organization with advocates and attorneys. And it was, like I said, pulled back, but it's the basis of a lot of discussion and a lot of concern. And, you know, the real theory is, instead of giving the schools the ability to waive their requirements, even their legal requirements, why aren't we putting the onus on the schools right now to make sure that they comply with the law, which would mean having PPTs right now online with the school districts and discussing with parents of all students with special needs, what is the program that we're going to need to supply your children with, and how are we going to make it work? Mm-hmm. Everyone knows that we can't all of a sudden have 20 OTs and PTs traveling to people's homes, and nobody's being unreasonable here, but we need the law to back us up. And this was just a very, very big and scary issue that came to light. So, I think if it comes to light again and it's proposed again, we all have to stand up, as was done this previous time, and explain that there are other ways to attack this. But relinquishing responsibility to our children is not an acceptable way of doing it.
No, it is not.
Yeah. It's pretty scary that it even came up, and it came up so quickly. Yes. And, you know, my guess is because everybody's so ill prepared, they thought we need a breather from this, you know, which, like you said, it doesn't make sense. Like, get on, do virtual meetings. Like, schools have free access to Zoom right now, so it's not a question of money. Certainly, if staff members are ill, you know, then they can have replacements as other people in the district.
Right.
But as we move through this, I mean, I think, you know, right now it's this educational piece is a big deal, and parents, you know, are, you know, ill-equipped at dealing with it, right? Even I'm trying to work out, my child is having online classes with Zoom. So he's just like Cleopatra's, right? Where everybody can see each other and whatnot. Yeah. So that's not what most places are doing. Private schools are doing that, quite a few. But, you know, I have to coordinate and work out while I'm working, because I am. But it's a challenge. I just worry about the regression of, and how are school districts with all students, not just special ed, going to deal with this regression. Right. And kids are getting online education, so they're meeting their 108, they've already waived in our state the 180-day requirement. So we already know they're not going to stay late.
That is
I was wondering about that. Okay, that's really interesting.
That's a state decision right now, right, Jen?
That is a state decision for Connecticut. I'm fairly certain most states will follow.
Yeah.
You know, there's, it's just, it won't make a huge difference because we're going to be out of school for so long. So to keep them in the end of June or whatever, you know, it's only going to buy 2 more weeks. Maybe.
Right.
So it's just not going, if that even happens, we need to be back in school. But you have an excellent point, Roseann, which is, how are we going to make up for this time? And that's one of the big reasons why a lot of people in our state are pushing, a lot of the attorneys, people through SEEK and COPA are pushing for the districts to have these PPTs online. And we can discuss, okay, for your child who has profound special needs, this online is not going to work. As soon as we resume, we're going to give him 5 days a week of OT, 5 days for PT, whatever it is, for speech, whatever it might be, so that there's a plan in line. Because right now, we're thinking there's no end in sight, and our children are not getting the services that many of them have been receiving since they were 6 months old. Right. And this is the first time in their lives that they don't have these interventions. And we need to be able to tell them, just for continuity and to keep the routine going, yes, you don't have it for X number of times, or when you go back to school, you will have it. Right now, there's so much up in the air. And we know the one thing that keeps our kids with special needs grounded is routine.
And all
Absolutely.
kids. Yes, yes,
So we have to
absolutely.
know what to be able to tell them. So
Yeah.
there's a
And
lot.
that's why, I did talk about this week that we really need a routine and a schedule. And it's really important to have some level of a consistent routine for all kids. But you are absolutely right, Jen, that we need this. This is required for special education kids. It'll be interesting to see what's going to happen, just like a kid returning back to school, right? After summer break, what's going to really happen with our kids, and hopefully they'll continue to thrive and be healthy, because that's the other part of this. Some kids are not feeling well, and so they may even just be missing out on the instruction that's provided as well. Luckily, we're finding most kids are not as affected by the coronavirus. And that's a great thing, but there's just so many unknowns.
There are, in the Department of Education, the Federal Department of Education does speak to that. If you are sick in your home with the coronavirus, with COVID-19, and your school is still in session, most are not, then you are entitled to homebound instruction.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
That's great.
Yeah. However, you have to take into consideration the health and safety of others. So homebound instruction is likely to be online instruction.
Yeah, because you can't have the exposure. Yeah.
Exactly.
I don't know if, I guess there might still be places, right, that have school. I'm not sure. Somewhere in the United States, maybe.
Right. Not in our areas, but I'm really not sure. But that the law is there. Another piece of legislation, or not legislation, but information handed down by the Office of Civil Rights, is that the schools are not required to have PPTs or IEP team meetings. IEP team meetings right now it's within the discretion right now of the school whether to hold them, even online. So,
wow.
So that's a huge issue as well, because if you're in the middle of any type of major decision for your child, it's now pushed off indefinitely.
And you have lots of families that you're working with, Jen, right now we're in the middle of major decisions, and now that's just on hold, so that's another piece that's just out there. And what are they going to do? They're not going to pick that up. They're not going to say, oh yeah, we're going to meet with you, even though we don't have to. It's just not going to happen, So, parents to utilize this time, as stressful as the IEP process is, maybe that's time to look through your documents and organize and relook at your data. Maybe spend some time, analyzing your data. I know when I did evals, I always had all my data by the year in a comparison chart. Yep. Another reason they loved me in the school district.
I'm sure of it. Speaking of comparison chart, I'm a scientist, so this is my orientation to ask the question of whether we have a precedent for what to expect in terms of the impact of this gap in education. So even though this particular instance that's nationwide, that's affecting us globally, and that's due to a virus is unprecedented, we have local examples, I'm sure, of natural disasters, earthquakes, tornadoes, other things that have hurricanes that have made it so that large areas are out of school for long periods of time. So there must be at least a small literature, scientific literature, that can give special needs families an estimate of the losses they can expect, that they, even if they don't have their own hard data, that they can bring to the schools, to the county, whatever, and say, my child is going to need these compensatory services because the scientific data show that on average, children, special needs children who have been out of school for X number of weeks or months lose this percentage of progress.
Right. You bring up a really great point. And I think that can be helpful, certainly. But when you're talking about individualized education plans, the best thing to do is to focus individually on your particular child.
Yes.
When you're
Absolutely.
talking about obviously scientific data and what things have happened in the past, the school district is very likely to turn around and say that child that lost X number of months or regressed by X number of months is not your child, and they have all these other circumstances surrounding their regression that your child does not have or could not have or might not have. So again, I think the best thing to do when we're talking about compensatory damages, and I like Roseann's idea as well, when we have time right now to go through, get all of your ducks in a row, put everything in a big binder, start looking from year to year through testing. Hopefully your district for every triennial has done the same testing. Many districts will use one cognitive test, one triennial, and then 3 years later switch to another one, so that you really have a difficult time comparing scores. But if you can get some consistency through the testing, chart it, make charts. 2010, they scored 85 standard score. 2013, now it's down to 72. Okay, show the decline, show whatever it is that the numbers reveal. And when you come back to the table, if you're not getting what you need based on discussions and anecdotal type evidence that you've seen at home in terms of regression, then you ask for testing again, and right away show the regression through the testing. So yes, I'm sure there are some pieces of evidence out there which would be helpful, that when there are these natural disasters, students do regret. I have no doubt that they do. But again, I think focusing on your individual child
is the most valuable thing.
Yeah.
Now we have a question that is something I hadn't thought about, to be honest, and it's about privacy for students. And if students are getting special education services and in a group, and they're doing Zoom in a group, does that use of Zoom with a special education class, right, that I guess the parents or anybody else that is there present with the child, does it violate their privacy?
My gut reaction to that question is no. And the reason I say no is because it's been documented time and time again that there's a lesser right to privacy for a student in a public school, because teachers are in, guests are in, evaluators are in constantly. So schools tend to use that as a reason why they don't want somebody to come in and observe, right? But when you look at all of the arguments against having them come in and observe, you see that typically the precedent through the legal cases, is that students in a public educational school system have a lesser right to privacy.
Yeah, and let me give you my top tip. Another reason why they loved me.
Let's hear it, Dr. Roseann.
When they tell you that you can't observe or your evaluator can't observe, ask for the written policy.
Right.
Very
otherwise,
good.
it's discrimination. So please ask for it. A while before it will be produced, but usually it means your evaluator can get in there and observe. So yeah, that's just something really interesting to think about. There's so many, this is just a domino effect, right? Like we have one thing.
Bless you.
Ramifications, right?
Absolutely.
Things that none of us even thought about. And so, definitely, I think maybe, what we can do, I gave in our, we have a quarantine guide, and some of the information you gave us, Jen, is going to be in our quarantine guide, and they can go into www.drroseann.com and they can get that quarantine guide. There'll be tips about homeschool resources, how to do homeschooling, and then this information about, what to do for kids, that have special education needs. So, we talked about using real world learning to help set a routine, depending on what your kid's level is. You're going to do your kids' schoolwork, right? Some kids are packets, sometimes it's Zoom. You're not going to have them sit for more than 20 minutes. I don't care if you're a special ed student or not. That's just good advice.
Some say that goes for adults too.
Yeah. So it's really important that we're not demanding that they sit and do work. That's just not what happens in a classroom. There's so much movement, but stick to the basics. Practice reading for your kids, students that you're working with. Maybe they have dyslexia, maybe they have autism. Try Audible books. That's a great resource for people. Read to your kids. Do whatever you can. I love that you're playing, you do Uno, you do Connect Four, whatever works. These are all learning opportunities. Learning, doesn't have to be that same way. And, that's how a lot of homeschoolers operate. They bake, they use math, doing those and crafts. Who doesn't love crafts? Get some stuff out. I talked about laptops. Yeah, right? And usually most level of kids can find a craft to do in some way, shape, or form, that can help bring some joy to your kids. Stick to a routine. I mean, I think that's really important. And then you have some recommendations about curriculum apps.
Yes.
Different things. Let's kind of go over those because we didn't really go over that at any point.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
So right now we're very fortunate that a lot of these companies are offering their full curriculum apps for free, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
So many of them are for younger students, but there are some right now that are for all the way through high school. ABC Mouse is for younger students, age 2 through 8. And that's a full curriculum for younger students. It's all interactive. It's game-based.
And if you have an older child whose skills are much, much younger, it's a nice point for kids. It's very engaging. I really like ABC Mouse, and I think it's a really great product for kids to learn from.
I agree. And then if your child's a little bit older, from age 8 to 13, they have Adventure Academy.
Yeah.
So it's also similar. If you're looking for something that goes all the way through high school, this one starts from pre-K, goes all the way to high school. Time for Learning is also a full curriculum app. I really like Brain Pop.
Yeah.
We're free right now. The reason I like that one is because it also has social emotional learning curriculum. And for many, many, many of our kids, that's probably the most important piece that we want them learning.
It's the most important piece out of anything, whether any parent wants to accept it. So you're going to go a lot farther in life when you have a higher IQ than a higher GPA. I'm just going to let
and
you
a higher emotional IQ, absolutely.
Yeah. Right? Absolutely.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
Sure.
What can parents do, Jen? Right now, they really can't do much if they're really struggling with a kid at home. They're used to having a 1-to-1 aide, or their kid is really resistant. Right. What can they do right now?
So we're doing a lot of, I have a child who has, pretty profound disabilities, who has behavioral, sensory, cognitive, everything, anything you could think of except for physical limitations. So we do a lot of movement. We have him outside 5 or 6 times a day, scootering, walking the dog, playing ball, obviously 6 feet away from anybody else, but we just have him walk. He likes to move and it keeps him regulated. If you can't get outside, there are apps called Go Noodle. Most of the kids are probably familiar with them already because the schools use it. It's a fun way to get moving. There are yoga apps, Cosmic Kids or Bunny Yoga. And then Disney has an app called Get Moving with Disney, which is another like workouts, but with your favorite Disney characters in them.
That's pretty fun.
Yeah, so there's some great things. Disney is doing virtual ride experiences.
Are they? I haven't even heard.
How fun is that?
Yeah.
What was the first one that you mentioned, the movement app that they do?
We're going to have a resource list of all this stuff in our guide on www.roseann.com.
Yes. Well done.
And we'll send it to you. Because we already took care of this.
All right. Awesome.
Working on it.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And I like the virtual ride thing. So Jen,
something fun.
Love
But
Disney.
if your kid is missing out going to aquariums, weekends for us were filled with bowling and the bouncy houses and whatever, Sky Zone, all of that activity after activity. So it's very different right now. But a lot of the kids love aquariums, so go to the virtual aquarium right on.
Yeah, there's virtual museums online right now. There's a lot of different things. I think parents need to hear that they need to do the best they can under the circumstances. You're clearly not going to be able to rely on your special education team at this moment, considering they're not even obligated to provide IEP meetings.
Right.
So, I still think communication is important. If you have concerns, I think you should still be emailing the team. And especially if they are providing education for your kids, if it's not appropriate, you need to document that, right?
You do. And, if your child is not receiving the same level of education as the other general education students are, it's an important thing to bring up. You call the director of special education of your district and find out how you can make sure that your student is receiving appropriate services.
And somebody's asking a specific question. This is great. So there's a lot of dyslexics in the world. 2 out of 10 children have difficulty in reading.
Right.
And that's, everywhere in America. And it's dyslexia is the #1 common characteristic of millionaires. And 40% of businesses.
I did not know that.
40% of businesses are owned by a dyslexic. Very creative mind, so smart. Love my little sausage. I got a dyslexic at home. And anybody who knows Giancarlo loves him because he's awesome. Right, Jen? So super creative. So anyway, the question is, what do you suggest for parents who are using a specific program, particularly a phonics program they no longer have access to at school? What do you suggest?
Right. So many of them are offering online tutorials for those types of Orton Gillingham programs. So I would suggest doing a Google search for that. It's not going to replace the type of tutoring they're getting at school because as everybody at this point probably knows, these multisensory programs must be delivered with fidelity in accordance with protocol. And we are not trained as parents to deliver them. So you're not going to get the same results as your child was getting at school. However, a little bit of something is better than nothing. There are, the other thing I would suggest is two other things. One is ReadWorks is an app that is free right now, which has students read passages at their own level, and then there are comprehension questions about it. There are many, many, many free apps right now that will read the books to you. Josh Gad is reading books online.
I know, it's how awesome, right? Love that. Yes. So much good stuff happening in the world.
Right.
It's so true.
Right.
Glennon Doyle's doing story time with Ms. G, and she's just a delight to listen to.
Yeah, awesome. It is really nice.
So and always, again, email your team and, ask for access to things that they could potentially be, schools have things in place that you may not have known about because you didn't need before. So definitely ask. And then also, that's documentation as well. So you have a lot of questions, Jen.
One more thing about the dyslexia piece. There are also many, many tutors, and I've had several contact me from my clients saying that they are doing online Wilson support, Orton Gillingham support. If you can afford to do that, you can pick up where your child left off and do it online. Like you said, you can call the school and say, this was my child's program. I would like it to continue. Will the teacher, the reading teacher, the tutor be available online to continue this service?
And if your child is a dyslexic, they need an Orton-based program. Orton is the mother of all the reading programs since 1917, and then there's several reading programs that grew out of it, and they're all really good. They're all evidence-based. So if you're getting a tutor, don't just get a reading tutor. Really get somebody who's at least highly trained. We love certified people, but they're hard to find. And you can get onto the Orton Academy. You can look look at your state resource list. You can get onto Bright's Law has a list of providers. There's, use Google to find somebody, and they can work with your child virtually to keep things going. This unfortunately probably is something you'll have to pay out of pocket, and who's to say that districts will reimburse anybody? They're under no obligation at this point, right, Jen?
That's correct, but hopefully the district will work with you, because the compensatory education that they will end up having to give afterwards
will be expensive.
It's going to be costly for them.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it names of specific programs. We'll have that in our guide. You can register at www.roseann.com. We'll get that. Here's a question. Are compensatory services different than extended school year services?
Yes, absolutely. So extended school year services are services for students who would regress or need extra recoupment time or have extremely severe disabilities and need services usually during the summertime, although extended school year could be an extended school day, earlier morning, earlier afternoon as well. Compensatory services are for services that you did not get. So extended school year is not to make up for something that you lost, but to make sure that you don't lose what you already know. And compensatory services are to make up for what was lost. The confusion lies in the fact that they're using the regression recoupment standard right now for whether students are going to be able to receive compensatory services. And that standard typically applies to ESY. But they are two separate things.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I mean, there's just so many facets to this virus and the shutdown. Not just in the United States at a global level, but our special ed kids are as important as everybody else. And I think some school districts and schools are trying the best and doing a really good job. And I hope that they continue. I'm going to be always super positive. I always would go into meetings really nice. Yes. And then we didn't always leave that way. But you got to be the advocate, right? So sometimes people don't like being called out on things that aren't right. So so I'm a huge fan of advocates, and just because they are there totally objectively just to help your child, and it's a really scary process. So what's the best way for people to get a hold of you, Jen?
Oh, so you can go to my website, which is www.jwadvocates.com, or you could call me at 917-841-7915.
Oh boy, everybody and their mother's going to call you.
I was going to say, you're the first to give the phone number.
That's what really makes my practice different than others. Yeah. Is we respond to the calls. We live and breathe it. And
you can tell it shows.
Yeah, and a lot of levels. Anyway, so grateful for you to be here and support so many mamas in this really ridiculously stressful time. But enjoy this time with your child the best you can, and just know you are doing the best you can, and really be there to connect, because even as stressful as it is, that's what you can do. That's what the gift you can give your kids. And this will all work out, because it has to.
That's very true. Yes, that's very true.
And thank you to our leaders in different states that are really, really fiercely advocating and making sure that this type of legislation is stopped. That's pretty awesome. So thank you. Be well, everybody. And tomorrow we have Dr. Aaron, who's an amazing spiritual leader, to help give us a little spiritual love and what we need right now.
Yes, we're really looking forward to that. Have a beautiful day, everybody. Thank you so much for being here, Jennifer. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. See you later, Dr. Rowe. Bye, everybody.
Bye.